Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Brent Venables, the Oklahoma Sooners, already starting to get active in the transfer portal, hosting a, I think, really intriguing target that we're going to talk about on Monday afternoon. But you make no mistake about it. This is an Oklahoma program that is going to be aggressive over the next couple of weeks. Now, we had a conversation about what positions we would like to see Oklahoma go out and address a couple of days ago, but we didn't have a ton of names to talk about. Now we got a lot of names to talk about at those positions of concern. Fired up to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, one to the Oklahoma fans, y'all have shown a ton of support over the last couple of weeks. We've had a lot to talk about. New OC. We've talked about the transfer portal. This episode right here largely curated from some of the responses that you gave in the comment section a couple of days ago. So appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's going to be busy next couple of weeks breaking down the commitments. Without further ado, let's get into it. And let's start with what I'd say is just eating your vegetables, right? Yeah, quarterbacks, wide receivers, they're the more flashy positions to talk about. We're going to talk about those positions. If this Oklahoma team wants to take a step in the right direction in 2024, 2025, that is, this offensive line needs to get figured out. I mean, every Oklahoma fan that watched every single Saturday knew this was a problem. It's really hard to be a good team in the SEC when your line of scrimmage play on the offensive line is not good enough. And that's just kind of what Oklahoma was dealing with in the 2024 year. Last year's strategy for Brent Venables in Oklahoma clearly didn't work. And what their strategy seemed to be was, hey, we're just going to go out and grab 5 or 6 offensive line transfers that were kind of average guys and just hope it figures itself out, works itself out. That clearly didn't work. I think the strategy going into this transfer portal cycle is instead of going out and getting 5 or 6 offensive linemen that are all kind of average, what I mean by that is you went out and got Spencer Brown or a guy like Mike Tarquin. We knew they were just solid average offensive linemen. We kind of had question marks if they were starting caliber offensive linemen in the SEC. Instead of going out and getting 5 different ones, go get 1 or 2 really good ones and kind of answer some of those questions specifically at the offensive tackle position. I look at the inside and say, I love some of the young cats that Oklahoma has recruited over the last couple of years. I think the inside of the offensive line is going to be just fine. I want to make sure that tackle position is in a better spot. Ethan Onwa from Rice, one of my favorite tackles that we see in the portal. 6'6", 345. He is a massive, massive human. I have to go back and watch some Rice games because I don't watch a ton of Rice on Saturdays in the fall. This kid, one, is a phenomenal athlete for his size, can move people off the line of scrimmage in the run game. I think most importantly, has just played a lot of football at the G4 at the group of 5 level and has played really well. Over 2,200 career snaps in 2024, 350 pass pro opportunities with only 5 quarterback hurries, only gave up 1 sack. This is the kind of offensive lineman that we've seen translate to the Power 4 level better. You look at Oklahoma and say, what was their best transfer portal addition on the offensive line? It was Fabici on the inside. Kind of a similar prospect. Played a lot of football at the G5 level, moving up to the Power 4 level, and kind of translated really well. And so this is a guy that's played a ton at a high level, has a ton of experience, and I think a proven bona fide, really, really good tackle. And so I think this guy would be a great fit for Oklahoma. And I think there's already starting to get some buzz around him coming to Norman. So we'll see how that plays out. That's who I'd be going after. Let's talk about a guy that is on campus for Oklahoma this afternoon. Donovan McCulley, a former Indiana wide receiver. As a Michigan fan myself, this sounds like Michigan, Oklahoma are kind of going to be battling it out for Donovan McCulley. To me, Donovan McCulley kind of replaces what you just lost with Nick Anderson. Donovan McCulley, to me, is really intriguing. Now, on the surface, he's going to be a fifth-year college football player that has been solid but not great at Indiana. What intrigues me about Donovan McCulley is his first couple years at Indiana, he was recruited as a quarterback and played quarterback. So he's relatively new to the wide receiver position. So although he's going to be a fifth-year guy, I think there's some real upside to Donovan McCulley's game as he continues to settle in as a wide receiver. In 2023, caught for over 700 yards at Indiana, almost averaged 20 yards per catch. Big body. on the boundary that can work vertically down the field and can go make plays for your quarterbacks. Like that's kind of what we thought Nick Anderson was going to be for Oklahoma in 2024. Obviously couldn't really find the football field with injuries. Donovan McCulley, I think, can certainly do that for Oklahoma. Another wide receiver that, and for Oklahoma, you're in a good spot at wide receiver. So I think there's a ton of talent in the transfer portal at the wide receiver spot. Kendrick Law, former Alabama wide receiver. This kid excites me as well. 5'11", 210 pounds. He looks like a running back. The weight room numbers for Kendrick Law are absolutely out of this world. I don't have them on the top of my head. You could do a quick Google search. This kid is just put together. Slot wide receiver, really good with the football in his hands. You look at how he could potentially balance out a guy like Donovan McCulley. I think Oklahoma is probably looking for two different kind of wide receivers. One that bigger bodied vertical threat wide receiver on the boundary. And then you probably want a guy like Kendrick Law who can work from the slot and is really good after the catch because he's so thick and then runs a sub 11-second 100-meter coming out of high school. This dude is an absolute dog with the football in his hands and was one of those guys that I expected to be a big-time contributor for Alabama in 2024. Two different things worked against him. One, the emergence of Ryan Williams. But number two, Jalen Milroe just doesn't really work the short, intermediate portions of the football field. If he's not throwing it deep, he ain't really throwing the football. And so a guy like Kendrick Law, because of his unique skill set, just didn't get a ton of opportunity within this Alabama offense. Blocks on the perimeter exceptionally well, too. I think that's worth noting. You see those weight room numbers reflect in terms of how he blocks on the perimeter. So he gives you some blocking on the edge as well. Those are the two names that I'm kind of intrigued by, but you make no mistake about it. There is a ton of talent at the wide receiver position, and I'm guessing Oklahoma will at least look to add two of those guys or two wide receivers over the next couple of weeks, and I would expect them to be pretty damn good. Now, moving on to the quarterback conversation, I think you got to start with John Mateer, but I got two quarterbacks I want to talk about. John Mateer, obviously the relationship with Ben Arbuckle, so he's not in the transfer portal yet. I think there's a lot of noise that he will be in the transfer portal, and obviously the relationship with Ben Arbuckle puts Oklahoma in a really good spot. Oklahoma's in a unique spot. They have an inroad onto what I think was one of the best quarterbacks in the country in 2024. What I love about John Mateer is one, I'm going to say dual threat quarterback. He's a weapon running the football. He's not just a dual threat guy. You take a look at the rushing numbers, 826 rushing yards in 2024, 15 touchdowns. Here's the kicker here. 55 missed tackles forced, 4.7 yards per carry after contact. Those are better rushing numbers than a lot of running backs that you see in terms of missed tackles forced in yards after contact. He's 6'1", 220, thick lower half, is an absolute – plays the game the right way, if we're being honest, like an absolute warrior out there in the football field. And then he's not just a runner, threw for over 3,000 yards, 29 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions, a 64% completion percentage with an average depth of target of 10.2 yards down the field. That's phenomenal. Like 64% completion percentage in and of itself is just kind of average. It's solid, certainly. When you factor in that he's pushing the ball down the field, that's really, really impressive. And obviously the familiarity with what Ben Arbuckle wants to do is certainly going to help. Another guy that I really like, Darian Mensah, hit the transfer portal last night. Oklahoma fans know him, right? And we saw him. I can't believe this kid was under-recruited the way he was coming out of high school. I looked at him as a redshirt freshman this year for Tulane and say, what were programs thinking at the Power 4 level not getting on this kid out of high school? 6'3", 200 plus. Good athlete, arm talent is dripping off this kid, can make any throw that you want in the playbook. Take a look at his numbers last year, 65% completion percentage, 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions with an 11.3 average depth of target. So another one of those quarterbacks that is pushing the ball down the field, gives you some athleticism at the quarterback spot as well. And he's only going to be a redshirt sophomore next year. So you got some time to build around him as well. Kind of replaces Jackson Arnold if you think about it, right? Both 2023 guys that were kind of the future of your quarterback room. You have the ability to get Darian Mensah into this program and say, not only can he be really good for us in 2025, he can be really good for us over the next couple of years as well. So I think that's a really intriguing aspect about Darian Mensah as well. Either one of these quarterbacks, I think I'd be thrilled with if I'm an Oklahoma fan. I'd probably prefer John Mateer because one, I think he might be a better football player. Number two, obviously the familiarity with Ben Arbuckle. You can't go wrong with either of them. The tight end position is something I'd like to see Oklahoma address too. And you got a guy that was an in-state target for Oklahoma in 2023 and Luke Haas. And look, it helps that he's from Oklahoma, but you make no mistake about it. There's going to be so many programs that are trying to get in for this kid. 6'3", 240. Difference may he is not going to wow you when you see him on the football field physically. Or if he walks into a room, you look at him and say, yeah, impressive body, 6'3", 240. He tower over me. But he's not one of those guys that is just freaky, dripping with physical traits. Understanding the tight end position, yeah, in a big way. He is so crafty, knows how to vary his speeds, knows how to work the middle of the field and get open. As a true freshman, he was on his way to being a true freshman All-American, season-ending injury. Then in 2024, just kind of got phased out of the offense because Taylon Green was really only throwing to Andrew Armstrong. Luke Haas, to me, is, in my opinion, the best tight end clearly in the transfer portal. It could be one of the better tight ends that we see in the country in 2025. Oklahoma wants production from their tight ends. Bauer Sharp just hit the transfer portal. Luke Haas, to me, would be a dynamite get, quarterback-friendly pass catcher, and he blocks. Look, when you're blocking as a tight end, yes, you can talk about size. To me, it just matters, like, do you want to block? There's a lot of tight ends that just don't really put a ton of effort into blocking. Not Luke Haas, like spirited blocker. And when you're a spirited blocker, chances are you're a pretty damn good one. That is Luke Haas. Big fan of Luke Haas. Last one I'll talk about on the defensive side of the football is Will Helt. Oklahoma's replacing a lot of edge rushers. And you look at the edge rushers that they might have coming back. Hopefully, a guy like Mason Thomas, obviously PJ. To me, you're looking for a little bit of a heavier-handed defensive, edge rusher. And Will Helt, although doesn't have the juice that PJ or R. Mason Thomas will have as pass rushers, Will Helt is a hammer in the run game. 26 run stops for Purdue last year in the Big Ten. We just saw Purdue edge rusher last year, Nick Scoren, become one of the best players in the country. Will Helt's probably not the juice that Nick Scoren gives you as a edge rusher, but as an edge defender and as a run defender, Will Helt's really, really good. Heavy hands. He's 6'6", 265, knows how to set the edge, knows how to get off blocks. That matters. Like, what do you want this Oklahoma defense to look like? Hey, we want to be really good against the run so we can let loose guys like R. Mason Thomas and PJ off the edge in third and longs. This is a guy that will set up those third and longs for you. And then maybe just take him off the field. I'm saying it like he's not a good – he can rush the passer at 14 quarterback hurries. That's not the message I'm trying to send. But what I'm trying to say is he's a hammer against the run. And that's something that when we talk about edge rushers oftentimes gets overlooked. Will Helt's a guy, in my opinion, would be a good addition, especially with some of the depth question marks we have on the defensive line. And we know Brent Venables wants to be deep and dominant on the defensive line. Those are the names I have right now. We'll obviously continue to update it as it goes. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.